In case you missed it last week, this episode is part 2 of my conversation with Laela Erickson, a financial planner here at Edelman Financial Engines from Washington. She and I covered so much ground about a topic that matters to many people, and we didn't want you to miss any of it. So here it is, a return to my conversation with Laela Erickson. So Laela, we called the audible. We said we're going to do a 2-parter. We've been talking about setting goals and really getting to not just the numbers, so what you spend now in the future, what you owe, what you have, and how that all comes together to see whether you're okay or not. But we wanted to get into a bit more about some of those emotions around what's going on that's driving people's concerns about whether they're okay or not. And that's what we want to dig into right now. So tell us, what have you been hearing from clients? Why are they so worried about whether they're okay right now?
Yeah, I know you've talked about this on previous podcasts with other planners because we're all hearing and seeing a lot of the same things, but it's really the fear of what's happening. I think politically, what's happening in the world, what's happening. Things just feel a bit unprecedented with AI, and how's that going to impact my job? And there's just so much fear around what's happening with the markets that they just seem to keep going up and up and up, and there's always these conversations around, oh, there's going to be an AI bubble, or people are selling USA, and should I be getting out of the market? Really, is like, should I go to cash? Should I go to super conservative investments? Like,
So
I just
let's
don't
hit
know
on
what to
that
do.
one. What is it? So should I go to cash, conservative? That seems so almost like antithetical to this idea of up and up and up and up and up. So can you dig into that one a bit? We haven't really
Yeah.
covered the other stuff. You're right. We've kind of touched on that, but go to cash, get more conservative, hit on that for us. What does that sound like? Because if you're hearing it, then a lot of our listeners and viewers are feeling that too.
Yeah. Very recently, I had a client say, I think I just want to go to cash or go to maybe like ultra conservative for the next 6 months. I just don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going to happen, and I just don't trust anything right now. I just want to go to cash,
Like time the market, basically.
Yeah, like
Okay.
just get me out of here.
Okay.
I'm so worried I'm going to lose my money, and it just seems so unpredictable, right?
So is the idea then going to cash or trying to time the market, get out for 6 months? What would be the trigger to go back in then? That's the part that's really fascinating to me, and I'm
Exactly.
sure to you as a behavioral
Yeah.
scientist.
When I first meet with a client, when we go through their plan, we build their plan, and then we have a second meeting where we actually dig into the investments. And so we talk about our investment strategy and also historically what's happened in the markets, right? What have we seen? And why do we want to stay in the market versus pull out of the market? And this particular client I had not had that conversation with yet. So it was a good opportunity to have that conversation with them.
So do you feel like
Um,
that is more prominent for people in pre-retirement zone, like 40s and 50s and
yeah.
60s, or is that more like 70s, 80s, and 90s people who built that, strategy, have the money that they need, and they just don't want to run out if they're not working any longer? Where's
Yeah.
the most of this coming from? Think of it as like the type of person you're hearing this from.
Yeah, it's definitely coming from those that are before retirement. So
Okay.
those that are, planning or saving for retirement. My retiree clients, my clients, I take an approach of protecting cash. So protecting 3 years of cash. And the reason I use 3 years is if you look at historically, just a 60-40, 60% equity, 40% bond portfolio, there's only been 2 periods in world history, or in the history of the markets, where we've had 3 years of a down market in a row. But when we look at like 5-year or 10-year rolling returns, only in the Great Depression was there some down years of a 5-year rolling return, but otherwise there have been, the markets have historically been up over that period of time. So that's kind of one of the things I show them, is just from perspective, and then also showing a graph to show those like instances in world history, that were terrifying at the time, that where we felt like there's no coming back from this, right? But we did. We came back from it. So down markets are actually really great opportunities for us to take some of our more preserved assets and buy into those equities when they're down. And then conversely, when the market's up, we can harvest those gains and then put them in a more or preserved position. But when I work with my clients, I protect 3 years of cash. So even if we have a down market, we let it do its thing. We let it take advantage of that down market to make strategic moves. But when you're working, it's a lot harder to do that, right? Because your investments are often in your 401k. So really what we're looking at there is our emergency reserve. Do we have enough set aside? So say we lose our job, right? But if you're working, the market goes down. That's actually a great time to put money into your portfolio. You're always dollar cost averaging, we call it, where you're putting money in every single month. So you're buying really efficiently. So when the market's up, you're not buying as much of that stock. When the market's down, you're actually buying more of the stock. So again, it's not a bad thing to have downturns in the market when you're working. And so I always encourage clients around that when they're in that pre-retiree stage.
So that's interesting. Is you're taking a very methodical approach.
Mhm.
For those who aren't yet retired, still working, have income, what you're saying is just keep that systematic investment plan going so that you're really buying systematically. And when markets are down, you're buying more of it. When markets are going up, you're not buying too much of it.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. And then on the other side of it, what you're saying is so that your retired clients can have confidence, you're making sure they have enough access to cash, in whatever vehicle that ends up
Mhm.
being, so that they don't feel like they have to sell unnecessarily, lock in that loss, incur, even if, markets are up and you sell, sometimes you incur capital gains,
Mhm.
things like that. So you're trying to help them most efficiently manage through a potential downturn or a challenging time. Am I getting that right,
Exactly.
Layla?
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
that's
That's
not setting
perfect.
and forgetting it for sure,
That's
right?
true. Right. That's true.
That's
Correct.
really looking at it, but in a very systematic, process-driven way. So
Yep.
so let's move then to the next question. And usually we ask what are clients getting wrong, and you already answered that in the last episode, and how you can help. But why don't we move to this then? With this spirit of the tension between setting it and forgetting it, and systematically visiting your money, what would be your suggestion? What do you suggest to your clients? How often do you suggest that they just take a look at their money and you know really check out whether it's making them feel confident or whether they're okay? Do you have a process or suggestion to them in terms of the
I
clients that work with you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually haven't ever recommended anything to a client, but being, kind of in this moment, what I would say is best actually not to look at your investments, especially in a down market, it's not going to make you feel good. Um, but, I don't think that's realistic. And I think, there's definitely, again, going back to that emotional tie, when we see our accounts go up, we just feel good,
Euphoric.
right? We
Yeah,
feel
more,
euphoric.
more,
Like, look how
more.
much money I have. But I think that's the problem, and that's kind of the thing that the more we can remove ourselves from that emotional connection to money and look at money as instead more like a tool. If you can focus on, again, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we want to do with this money? And think about buckets, right? Bucketing strategy. So when we were talking about the retirees and
I
having
love
that
buckets, by the
bucket,
way, Leila. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So in retirement, we've got that cash bucket, right? That's a bucket. That's our short-term cash, 1 to 3 years or 0 to 3 years. But then we also want to think about that 3 to 7 years. That's a great bond portfolio to cover that money. And then 7 plus, we really need to be in equity so we can um, keep up with the inflation and taxes that our investments are going to potentially have for us. So
And
when
that's
it
that
when
buying power, that future buying power in a sense.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly, yeah. So when you think about those equities, who cares if they go down, right? Because our goal is to take that money out in 7 years. It's not the priority. So it's I think, again, if you set up the right buckets, it just allows you to sort of step back and just live life fully. And so we're not having to focus so much on it.
And I love this idea of buckets. So part of the bucketing piece is time. When do you need the money? And what I
Yeah.
hear you saying is if you don't need the money right now, it's not about not looking at it or looking at it. It's about why trigger your emotions, to your point, where you have to then exert such self-control for money that you're not going to need right now, and that you're already working with a professional around,
Yeah.
and they're basically doing that on your behalf, making sure that's okay. So a professional like you, Laela, and then you have that overarching goals-based plan that's your North Star on, keeping up with inflation, to your point, making sure that money is working hard for you as a tool so you have that
Mhm.
future buying power. So I love that.
Yeah.
And then as you get more near term where you need the money sooner, do you feel that psychological safety, which is a bit of what you're talking about, but also the practical aspects of it, like that emergency that might come up unexpected, car breaks, to your point, a home, a roof is leaking, in the snow, whatever that is,
Exactly.
all the way
Yeah.
to, maybe opportunistic money that you could put more in the market on if
Yeah.
investments were to go on sale, right? So what does that look like? And just being really clear on that tool, what that money is for, why it's invested or not, and how you're going to use it, or just let it sit there to give you that comfort, and just be very intentional about it. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing from you. Does that sound right?
That's spot on. Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you, with respect to this idea of going conservative, cash, should I do it right now for a certain period of time and then I'll jump back in? What's one thing that clients can do right now to assess whether or not that's a good idea?
So
Or
we
by
never
the way,
think
not just clients, but
if
listeners, right? Everyone in
yeah.
general. Yes.
Yeah. I don't it's never a good idea to take all of your investments and put them in cash. That's our perspective at Edelman Financial Engines. It is important that you have that emergency reserve. So I think going back to our last episode where we talked about having your budget and knowing what you're spending, and having that, once you've identified what your monthly keep the lights on expense is, make sure you have that much set aside and protected, right? And make
That's
sure at
great.
least when you're working, right? And then if you're retired, make sure you have your next 3 years of expenses protected, because you're
Yes.
pulling money out of your accounts, right? So that's kind of the key thing. And it depends. Do you have a partner that has a reliable job? There's so many different variables, but I think the best thing you can do, honestly, is working with a planner, work with somebody who understands this, knows this better, and can really help guide you through those emotional ups and downs. Because when you look at what value a planner brings, everyone seems to think it's fine. It's the investment management, right? That's why you hire someone. And I think investment managers, they just manage investments. That's just what they do, right? They're not really doing the planning part. I think, really work with the planner, work with somebody who can help you navigate, taxes and estate planning, and, your budget, right? And your goals, and help you identify opportunities or tools that are going to be the best for you long term, and make sure they're a fiduciary. So, but yeah, I think that's the best thing you can do.
Thank you. Thank you, Leila. I appreciate that. And this idea of, the one thing people can do right now is just look at their expenses, see if they have enough short-term cash to manage through any kind of uncertainty. I really like that idea. Getting that plan in place, and then giving you the confidence to stay invested in up and down times, and let
Mhm.
those emotions, be, because we're just emotional beings, right? To
Yes.
your earlier comments, but
Yeah.
put them in the right place, and just remind ourselves, money is a tool. It gets us to where we want to go, and there's ups and downs in a process to it all, and we
Yeah.
just have to let it play out. So with that, Laela, thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
your wisdom over these 2 episodes. We're so grateful. It's always fun hanging out with you. Any last words? Yes, yeah, exactly. Heart emojis or signals. Any last words before I send us out?
Yeah, I think one final thing I wanted to mention was, we talked a little bit about how money can become, everything, right? That we're so focused on money. One of the ways that I've found that you can remove the tie, or like the grip that money has on your heart, is to give some away, right? To give to charity, to give to a family member, to give to somebody who needs it. If you feel like money has, like you've been feeling like you need to hoard it, I find that when you can give some away and realize it's not everything, right? And then sometimes giving can just change your heart around money. So
Well, you heard it here. Plan, and if money is stressing you out, see how the money, even small dollar amounts or time, impacts someone else in their life. And I think you're right, Laela. It contextualizes it as an important tool to get you to where you want to go, but it also puts it in its right place, which is about living your life, living your best life. So thank you again, Laela, for
yeah,
joining me.
thank you for
Appreciate
having
it.
me.
Yeah, we'll probably have you back again
Okay, would love
at some
that.
point in the future. And to all of you listening, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have another new episode with a new Edelman Financial Engines Financial Planner next Wednesday. You can subscribe to More Money on Your Mind on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And if you leave us a rating, we'd be grateful. Until next time, I'm Michael Liersch, Chief Planning Officer from Edelman Financial Engines. Thanks for listening. The views expressed are not necessarily those of this station. Information is believed to be reliable but is not guaranteed. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute investment, legal, insurance, or tax advice. It is not an offer to buy or sell any product and does not represent an endorsement of third parties. All investments have inherent risks. Consult a financial advisor before investing. Individual results may vary. The show is pre-recorded. Money on Your Mind, produced by Edelman Financial Engines and hosted by Michael Liersch.